That's a sign of a good conference. People are not sneaking out, going shopping and stuff. We are here. I just want to take a minute and thank so much Carolyn, Leighton, David, and the team here for the honor of being your Mistress of Ceremonies this 25th Summit. Thank you. So now I get to introduce a friend. Kathy Lomax is Deputy Chief Information Officer at LA Healthcare Plan. As an IT executive with over 25 years experience in leading financial services and healthcare, she's led a variety of global teams across IT disciplines, including infrastructure engineering and operations, application quality management and support, IT finance, and vendor management. At LA Care Health Plan, Kathy is responsible for IT shared services in support of solution delivery and facilitates the strategy and the initiatives under the Office of the CIO. She has extensive experience in overseeing large-scale projects and programs, leveraging globally distributed resources with an eye towards budget control and continuous improvement. Kathy is just amazing, and she sits on the Southern California Society of Information Management Board and has served as the event chair since July 2018. She led WITI's Orange County Regional Network as well for 4 years, earning her seat on the Global Advisory Board since 2017. A huge WITI welcome, Kathy Lomax.
So I'd like to introduce my panel. We have an esteemed panel today, and I really appreciate everybody participating in this event. So I'm going to introduce Chris Smith from Ticketmaster. He's the VP of Engineering and Data Science for Ticketmaster. So come on up. Next is Linda Tong. Linda is the VP of Product Experience and Innovation at AppDynamics. I'll let them do some introductions for themselves as well. Bene Werle is the Vice President Transformation at TriNet, one of the sponsors of our event today. I think AppDynamics is as well. Thank you, Bene. And Elizabeth Hsu, she is the CTO at CP Group and actually has been a WITI Hall of Fame recipient, right? Thank you. So before I start with the panel, I want to do just a quick shout out to the WITI leadership teams that are in the room today. The WITI leadership teams are regional networks around the world, and I'd love to have everybody that's here that's on a WITI leadership team stand up, and let's give you a warm round of applause for being the eyes and the ears in the local regions of this organization. Thank you. All right, I'm going to give you a chance to just tell us a little bit more about yourself.
I'm Chris Smith. I, a Canadian, grew up in Canada, started in the software industry in the finance business, did my own startup early on in the .com era, thought I was going to make it rich, crashed and burned pretty spectacularly. Moved down to LA and started working at Sun Microsystems, and had a good run there doing software development for a lot of e-commerce systems. Before I kind of got bored, started to look at trying to get into maybe management, thought that would be challenging for a while, but ultimately got an invitation to work at Overture Labs doing research where I sat down against a bunch of people who were experts in their particular field and had to learn everything they knew in the space of a few days and then put it into production. So it was a perfect job for a guy like me. I was never going to get bored. I was never going to know everything. It was perfect. And that led to a 10-year career in ad tech before I started to get burned out on ad tech and took a break, and now I try to use those skills at various companies that I work at to help them target and reach the audiences that they want, which is what I do at Ticketmaster.
Great, thank you. Linda.
Hi, I'm Linda Tong. I have been in the tech industry my whole career, more or less, minus my first job where I was in investment banking and realized that that is absolutely not for me. That's what ultimately pushed me into tech, anything that's not iBanking. And have more or less worked in consumer technology, starting at Google, working on Chrome and Android, and then moving on to startups, working on mobile advertising networks, and ultimately building a mobile operating system and a mobile phone. Then made a detour to the NFL to go pursue my passion for football. Clearly, I'm a linebacker, but went there to go lead their digital product group. And during the journey at the NFL, I found a really interesting product that we're using called AppDynamics, and had a lot of fun words for our sales associates and their product team, which ultimately led me to join their product team to go fix some of the problems that I saw as a customer. So now I've joined the dark side of the world on enterprise product, and have been enjoying a stint there.
Bene.
Hi, I'm Bene Worley. I've only been at TriNet about 7 months, and it's been this huge adventure, I'd say. I was at Cisco for 18 and a half years, and you have this gigantic global company with thousands and tens of thousands of people, and now I'm at TriNet, and it's very focused on small, medium business in the United States. And it's a huge difference in how you think. And so I do transformation of various processes and systems at TriNet. But I started my career as a naval architect, and I spent the first half of my year as a naval architect, and I would just tell you that is systems engineering at its finest. And I apply everything I ever learned in engineering and on engineering projects to fixing operational issues in large businesses.
And AppDynamics is a Cisco product, right?
Yes.
So I heard you two at the table
Yeah,
talking.
we crossed paths for like a hot minute.
Yeah, exactly.
As AppDynamics got acquired, we sort of flew past each other.
That's right.
Okay. Elizabeth.
Oh, hi, I'm Elizabeth Xu, and grew up in China, wanted to be an astronaut, so I studied space physics at a bachelor at Beijing University, and later on just said, you know what, I don't think I can be an astronaut. So I went on to study the environmental science, and then in the 90s, I came to the States, and found out that computer science is such a great frontier, so I got another master in computer science and PhD in science. So then with that background, a lot of programming skill I went on. I think I started my career at IBM and building the digital library, content management suite from scratch. And later I became a manager at DB2. And since then, I think that was the time that I came to the first my WITI conference. And then during that conference, I felt I learned one word called a career. I never thought about a career, but that was the turning point for me that I really thank WITI for that. And then after that, I went on and at the Silicon Valley, went to a different company and became a head of engineering, a CTO. And then last year, I went to Thailand to really run the CTO organization for an international conglomerate, about 350,000 employees, and in over 100 countries. So now I just got my first board position of a public company, and also advisory role at MIT. So, you know, there's so many things that in my journey I never felt I planned it, even though I wrote a book about planning your career at Amazon. But I still felt that many people will contribute to your success, and at least my mentors and even WITI that early in my career really made a turning point for me. And then thank you, and thanks, Caroline.
Yes, thank you. Well, everyone's seen the stats over the years about women being few in the technology space in the workplace. IDC has recently done a study with WITI, and there was a publishing of 2018 WITI Randstad IDC survey as well. And only 25% of women are in IT in the U.S., which is astounding, and I don't know if it's getting significantly better year over year. I think the stats that we saw yesterday were, roughly the same, maybe inches of gain, with only 2% of venture capital firms being women-founded, which is ridiculous. So we're hoping to make a difference and change those stats, and I think the experiences of our panel today will help, some takeaways about what you can do within your own advocacy for helping get more women in tech. So I'm going to ask each of you this question. What made you decide to even get into tech?
So when I was young, before I even got into learning computer science at school, I was interested in computers, and I wanted to play with them. And part of what appealed to me about the industry once I started to dig into it was that it was actually a pretty inclusive industry back then. Late 70s, early 80s. It was basically a bunch of misfits from wherever place they came from. They were all welcome in that industry. And that's the part of the industry that I hope to get back to, because I always felt like a misfit. And I was like, hey, this might be an interesting place for me. I can be part of this community. And then as I was coming out of school, it was more about the fact that so many other fields, there were people who had years and years of experience and knowledge about how to do everything. And the great part about the software business was that it was constantly reinventing itself, which meant that nobody could know more about how to do stuff in software than I did. I mean, no one knew, but still, no one knew was a good starting point for me. And it also meant that I could be learning forever, which I always found very stimulating. So it was a natural draw from that sense.
Great.
Nice. I totally agree with that. To be fair, I came out of college with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. So my first path was investment banking, because everyone said that's where the money's at. After sleeping under my desk for a couple of months, I decided that wasn't for me. And applied for every job I could apply for, and got an offer at Google, and I was like, oh, this free food looks great. So I joined Google not having any real experience, and an economics and healthcare degree, and luckily I stumbled upon something really awesome. And so I didn't really choose tech, but what was great and what kept me in tech was, honestly, it's that the speed of change and the opportunity to have a massive impact, and the ability to really feed that curiosity where you can continuously learn. And it was having that kind of an environment where every day I was learning, I was being challenged by those around me, and on top of that, I was seeing the ability to actually touch millions of people with the products that I was building. It was the perfect combination of everything that was important to me. And so I'm lucky I stumbled into it. Thank goodness, finance is terrible for me, but that's what's kept me in the space.
And Bene, with 10 years in the Navy, I don't know if you got to choose your path in terms of the engineer, or did you happenstance automatically get into the tech
No,
skills?
so when I grew up, I was the youngest of 9 kids, and my older brothers decided that since I was going to be the youngest and around the longest, that I better learn how to fix everything. And so they made sure I knew how to, whether it was plumbing or the car or electrical, it didn't matter. They were going to teach me how to fix it so that when they were gone, I could fix it. And that kind of stuck with me, and that I started saying, what the heck am I going to do in college? I guess engineering, because you fix things. And I think that my love of the ocean actually led me to naval architecture. Naval architecture actually led me to a career in the Navy. That's just kind of, sometimes you just take something you love, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing, and you find different ways to satisfy that need of what you really love to do. And I was fortunate enough to be able to do that in the Navy. And then when I got out of the Navy, to learn that operations is just engineering applied to business. And so that's what I've been doing ever since, and it's a lot of fun.
Great. Elizabeth, how'd you get into tech?
Yeah, at first I wanted to be an astronaut. I found out that was too high out of reach for me. So when I studied space physics, we had a physics class that we tempered with the 8080 board. It's in the early 80s. And also work on the large Honeywell computers. And I found out I'm so good at programming. And then this is why. And also I'm very good at fixing things like you do. Like the plumbing, the electrical boards. I dig trenches and put all my plumbing together, that kind of a thing. And I just feel like I'm a really engineer on the bottom of my heart. And then the computer industry is here. When I came to the state, I thought, wow, this is something great. You can, as you said, you can impact millions of people's life, and then you can control the satellite using the programming language. It's so impactful, and then it just opened up so many possibilities. I was just so intrigued by this industry. I think this is going to continue with AI, IoT. I felt like for the rest of my life, this is going to be a great field, and I'll continue.
Yeah, good. Well, according to that IDC research survey, 33% of women have a focus on their careers and want promotability and opportunity for promotion, whereas only 24% of males feel that same type of need. So each of you have been successful in your own careers over time. What strategies did you use to get into those executive level positions? And did it sort of happen happenstance, or did you have a focus to do that all your career to begin with?
Should I start?
Sure.
So it definitely wasn't there from the beginning of my career. I was ambitious, wanted to be successful, but I hadn't really thought of the executive track necessarily as the one that I wanted. It was more as I was operating in the business world, starting to understand how everything worked. I'm an engineer. I like to fix problems. A lot of times I saw the problems in the way the organization was actually functioning. And I'm also an engineer, which means I couldn't keep my trap shut about it. And so I figured out after a while that it was better to actually have the responsibility, since I was going to try to do the job anyway. People would like me a lot better if that was actually my responsibility when I was doing the job.
Part of the solution.
And I did kind of stumble into it. A lot of my career, I wasn't in that kind of role, and I got into a lucky opportunity where I could lead a fairly small group of people, and it was based on my technical skill. That was what they got me into the opportunity in the first place. And to be honest, I was hesitant about it for a moment, because I had tried doing management a little bit earlier in my career, and it hadn't gone very well because I didn't have any support. But this was a very supportive environment, and more importantly, I fell in love with the team. And once that happened, I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to look after these people, and I'm going to get us to where we want to go. And from that, it's been a series of very fortunate accidents would be the best way to describe it. I wish I could say that I planned it out better. I'm actually looking forward to learning from the experts here so that I can chart my career better.
Yeah, Elizabeth and I were talking about how we didn't know that was what we wanted to do in the beginning. Is that similar stories that you have, Linda and Bene, Elizabeth?
Yeah, for me, I think it was more about identifying opportunities as they happened. Probably my biggest career growth happened in the span of 2 years. I joined a startup as employee number 3. I found out on day 2 that we had 6 weeks of runway left. And I was like, great, I left my job at Google for this. Fantastic. And, I realized that our product was failing and that we really didn't have a plan of how we were going to succeed as a company, and I was going to be unemployed very soon. And in that moment, I had the decision to either start looking for new jobs or go back to Google or figure out what to do with 6 weeks of runway. And I leaned in and figured out how did we take the one piece of our mobile gaming product and actually pivot it into a very different product, which turned out to be an ad network. And we went from having 6 weeks of runway left and doing $100 to $1,000 a day in revenue to doing around $1 million a day in revenue 6 months later. And that went from a 3-person company to an 8-person company to a 300-person company. And leading that change and being the person that didn't say, well, crap, I'm going to start printing out my resume, and actually just saying, let's dig in and figure out how do we solve this problem. It really took my career in a very different direction. I went from being a lone PM to becoming our chief product officer and running a large chunk of our product engineering design team. And what I found is that was a unique opportunity to lean in a moment where everybody was getting ready to run away. And throughout my career, every time like an opportunity like that has presented itself, leaning in has always led to my career growth. So when I went to the NFL, as things started to change, as there's a lot of chaos, I decided to go and roll up my sleeves and solve problems, and usually that's paid off. And even in my current role, I joined AppDynamics with a small team of 3, really focused on a very small problem, and then I've somehow managed to go from running an innovation lab to running our product team, our design team, our front-end engineering team, our knowledge management team, and this innovation lab that started up as my core responsibility. And this all is because of just identifying problems and deciding to be a part of the solution, as opposed to watching someone else solve it on our behalf. And so that's more or less been my career trajectory.
Yeah, Bene or Elizabeth, anything to add?
Maybe just one twist. I've had a lot of advocates, and usually they ended up being my boss along the way. So usually they were an advocate, and then I said, oh, they'd be awesome to work for. And because they already knew me, they said, hey, I've got an opening for you. And so I think learning and listening what other people do and understanding and empathizing is probably been the biggest key to success for me, because when I listened and I learned, then all of a sudden I was able to make different connections, and those connections led to other opportunities. And so I think it's just getting out of your silo.
Yeah. Elizabeth?
I would say that the lean in is absolutely the great thing. That when I always said, don't be afraid to step on some other people's toe when there's no foot under that table. So don't worry about it. And then if there's any problem, you should just take the ownership. But throughout my career, I think Kathy and we talked about at the very beginning, I never thought I was going to become an executive. And one of my HR VP said, you should be a CTO. I said, why? He said, you have a great ability to bring the technology and business together, and you can simplify it to tell the people who has no technical background, and you connect really well with the customers. I said, oh, okay. And then I think throughout my career, like even when I was little, they always say, you're the president of a class. When I went to Stanford, they were like, you're the president of a class. And people just gave me those titles I felt like I had to live up with. But since the VP of HR said, you should be a CTO, I thought about it. I did a lot of brainstorm with him, and we put a plan together. And later on, I wrote a book called The Myth of a Promotion. You can get it from Amazon. And I taught that class in Stanford for 6 years. And then I felt once you feel like you have the capability and you have the desire, you need to have a plan. For example, I went to Stanford for the executive program. That gave me 6 weeks of time to study a mini MBA. And then when I get my first board position, I found out, the thing that I learned from those 6 classes was so critical for me to understand the business operation of the company. When I was at IBM, they put me through 8 classes of project management. And I literally was able to learn so much from those things. I think those continuous learning is another thing that helped me to grow the career. Having a proper planning, have a partner in crime that always encourage you and say, this is a good plan, get a proper education. And then the last thing but not least is to have a very good LinkedIn profile. And I felt, almost every single of my opportunity, people reach out to me through LinkedIn. And I felt like that is a great thing. You need to do a good job in building a good brand. And once you have a good brand, the brand will work for you when you're sleeping.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's interesting that everybody had similar stories, that they didn't set out to do that, but it sort of happenstance because you had advocates and really great people that you surrounded yourself with, and they saw talent in you. So everybody's been successful in one way or another, but I'm sure that there's some roadblocks or wrong turns that you may have made in your career path that may have delayed success or delayed some things for your career. I mean, can either one, who would like to share a story?
I can certainly share. I dropped out of college. I was in a circumstance where I was doing a co-op program, and I would go out for 3 months working in the field, and I'd come back and then go to school. And I had this terrible experience where I went and worked at a research lab that was doing distributed computing for 3 months. Had to learn a lot for that. I had no previous training in distributed computing whatsoever. And then I came back and took a class in concurrency. And I was like, everything in this entire class that I'm going to spend the next 3 or 4 months on, I learned like the first week on that job. And I think there's a problem here. I'm seeing a difference, so I dropped out. It's a foolish decision made when I was very young. I always tell people, if you want to go the hard way, I've mapped that out pretty well. If you want to go the easy way, you might want to try a different approach. The other thing that I would say that I struggled with is I worked for a startup by the name of XDrive during the dot-com era. And for those of you who haven't read the storybooks, XDrive had a pretty tumultuous collapse. I joined them after they had done their first rounds of layoffs, and I bought the sales pitch that everything was on its way back up again. And I stood around for layoff after layoff after layoff, and I just held on to the bitter end. And one of the lessons I learned from that was that I had wasted a year of my life to a large degree, or at least a year of my career, because a company that's going under is very time consuming. You have to really be devoted to it to continue to function. It's very demoralizing. And I had given up all that time and all that energy for something that was clearly going to crash. And if I'd been smarter, I would have moved on sooner.
Yeah.
Any other
Should I go next?
examples of turns the wrong way?
Oh yeah, I think that mid of my career, one time the chairman of the board called me in and said, "Elizabeth, I want to talk to you about something." I said, "What?" He said, "You're too serious. You're so black and white." And then he said, "You should just relax a little bit," because I thought I was really dumbfounded because I felt like I slept like 4 hours every day. I worked like 12 hours every day. I tried to make everything work and try to help everybody. And you said, "I'm too serious." You say, "Yeah, because other than work, you have no other interest. You just, how can you build a relationship with other people when you are work all? And also when you say, hey, I'm feature complete, I'm GA'd, and without go beyond to see what customers' reality, right? You're so black and white." So I think that was the turning point for me. Just look at, oh, okay, I'm a person. I also need to live a life. Not only just put 12, 16 hours every day without even knowing my kid. I look back, it was really true because I remember I was at IBM. My 8-month-old baby kind of did not recognize me because I worked too hard. Wow. And I tell you another thing that last year, because I was living in Thailand, I came back, my home, the keypad was digital. I forgot the code to my own home. I mean, seriously, I would say that the turning point here is, for me, is I'm a workaholic, I know that. But on the other side, all of you, think about it. Living a life is not only just about living a life and make you a full person, that is, make you a more interesting person, to build a relationship with your coworkers, with your family, with your community. That's what make me feel like I'm a better person, even though I'm still not doing that well, but I think that is something that reminds me.
Okay. I'm going to go on to the next questions as we're running short of time. What are the 3 most important qualities that you look for when promoting others around you?
Why don't you guys go since
Sure.
you can get the answer?
I'm lucky because I'm surrounded by some really amazing people, but I would say the one that I hone in on the most with like everybody I work with and talk to about sort of what's the most important thing I want to see in like growth is infinite curiosity. I think just this hunger to learn is ultimately what's going to set someone up for success. Because anytime you take on a new role or expand or move to a new space, if you're not curious, if you're not looking to learn something new and you're looking to take what you already have and expect that that's going to be enough for you to take on a new role and be successful, then you're probably going to fail. And so I think like curiosity is super critical. Other one is like how creative are you in problem solving? Do you solve every problem with this same approach, or can you look at it from different angles? And then the third part is resiliency, because just especially if you're a woman moving in tech, if you don't have resiliency, it's going to be very, very tough to move up in this world. We're still in I would say, the pioneer trailblazing stage where kind of got to deal with some shit while you climb your ladder. So those are probably the three for me.
Yeah, and I would say, in fact, I used to interview people for this quite a bit, and that's the ability to deal with ambiguity, especially in an engineering environment where so many people are black and white.
Yes, that's
It's
right.
tough.
Yes.
It's what we are. But the ability to leap ahead, and instead of having to have all the answers laid out with all the data, to be able to make a decision is to say, okay, we kind of have a picture, we got it directionally, let's start going and we'll figure it out.
Yes.
Probably the greatest trait that I look for. And then probably the second one is practical positivity. So I don't think anybody believes someone who's always positive and is always a cheerleader. On the other hand, it is a real drag to work with someone who is constantly pulling you down. And there's this happy medium that says, we can do this. Yeah, it's going to be hard, but we can do this. And that's what I would think is practical positivity.
Yeah. I would say the first one is really the integrity. Someone you can trust. That someone will not tell one story differently at the different circumstances, or they make decisions really that they can stand by. The second thing is really the person will have the next level of view. Like if you want to be a CIO, you got to have I call it virtual position, that you are able to have multiple dimensional thinking to look at as a CEO, look at a CIO's peer, look at a customer, and you can assume different positions and make the decision, make the win-win. I think that's number two. Without that, the person has no potential. Number three is continuous learning, continuous improvement, like you said. And you said, like, when there's something broken, it's not only just fix the problem, but look at how going to improve at large. Moving forward, we're not going to have this problem again. So those are the traits that I'll look for.
Okay, great. I actually have a question for you, Chris, in terms of the male on the panel. Do you see other men advocating for women more so than they had in the past, at least in leadership roles? And does that sort of cast a stone against men when they're doing, in the circles, male circles, I should say?
Does it cast a stone against them? No.
Or are they everybody saying, rah, rah, let's go, guys?
Yeah, I would say that that is something that has changed in the last, from when I started my career 20 years ago. There would have been a lot of reluctance and hesitance, I think. But these days, there doesn't seem to be any of that. It's certainly much more focused on the individual talents of the person being advocated for. And that tends to be what the discussion focuses on. And frankly, a lot of organizations in tech are very aware of the fact that there is this disparity, and no one that I know at least is thrilled about it, right? We're all sitting here going, this is not good. And so any opportunity where you've got a candidate who sort of presents themselves, and really good leaders present themselves, like it just sort of becomes obvious that this is someone who has potential, then it tends to focus the mind when you're like, well, wait, we don't have as much representation here as we would like, and here's a person who fits the bill perfectly, why wouldn't we, right? And that's, I see that thinking much more often now, and it's certainly in our organization, we're about 25% ahead in terms of EVP, SVP roles
Great.
of what the gender norm is for the tech industry. We're very proud of that. We don't make any, we're not subtle about
Go
it.
Ticketmaster.
We're like, yeah, let's keep driving this. I don't see anybody having any problem with it in our organization. I think that has changed, though.
Okay, yeah, that's great to see, and the greater the advocacy, the more opportunities there are, I think. So what do you believe are the key barriers preventing, this is for anybody on the panel that wants to answer, that are preventing women from occupying a proportionate number of executive positions, either at high-level leadership or even board seats, C-level suites?
Oh, I can take this one. I think the first of all is your own mindset. Unless you want it, you will not go forward. I think if you don't have the vision that you see yourself in those positions, you will never get there. The second thing is proper branding, that you need to, if you cannot write your resume or your stuff up, hire a professional and really dig into what are your attributes, and also find mentors to really be I call it the partner in the crime, to really see like what is missing. And I have over 20 mentors, people I call mentors. I constantly go ask them, like, give me some feedback, what should I do? And those mentors sometimes are your supporters. I think finding a good, as you said, that some people from your past, that Ginny, that they'll bring you back. I think the network, and also get some training if you feel like you're not be able to articulate your business idea or yourself, like who you are. Well, then hire some professional, get a coach to really coach you. I think those are the things that if you don't do that, you probably will not be able to get into the next level or even to the board position. And networking is extremely important.
Yeah. I agree with what you're saying, because I think it's like your example before, you waited for someone from HR to tell you you'd be a great leader.
Yeah.
And I think part of it is just raising your hand and saying, I want to be that great leader.
Yeah.
I want to step up into this position. And then in addition to that, I think it's, in addition to mentors, I think having champions, right?
Yeah.
Because very rarely have I seen an executive position filled where, I mean, it's like sometimes you have growth from within, but many times it's outside recruiting. And having a champion who's looking out for you and who's going to recommend you for these positions,
Yeah.
you have a much higher chance of getting it. Because very rarely do I see executive positions filled by people who are just submitting resumes. It's typically, you're connected to a recruiter, or you know somebody and you're being recommended in. So you need that champion network. You need people who are thinking about you as a leader, and they will only think about you as a leader if you tell them, one, I'm a leader, and two, I want to take on a bigger role. And so it's being top of mind for people. So that they make those connections, I think is really critical.
Another thing, volunteers is so important. You volunteer at the nonprofit or some events, like at IBM. I volunteer for the Asian Women Network, Asian Employee Network. And then I got the call, someone said, there's a manager position at DB2, you want to apply? So actually my first manager job was not really a promotion. It's someone from that network saw what I did. As I mentioned, I was a workaholic. And they understand I take the ownership, I work really hard. And they call me up, said, do you want to be the manager? So I think it's just contributing to the much bigger of a good. People see you have a bigger heart, and then they will recommend you.
The other part of that is a sense of entitlement for it, though. I will say when I'm recruiting technical women, sometimes I have this unfortunate conversation where I'm saying, look, there's a great opportunity here for you. I see a lot of potential. And they say, well, I like where I am right now. They treat me about as nice as everybody else. They treat me the same as everyone else. I'm like, yeah, that's nice you're being treated the same as everyone else. I'm telling you you're better than everyone else, and I want to put you into a different role that takes advantage of it. And because of the history of people being treated unfairly, just being treated fairly seems like, oh, that's good enough for me. I don't need to go any farther. And I always find that conversation very frustrating.
Yeah,
Benny,
absolutely.
anything to add?
No.
Linda? Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I totally empathize with that. I've said that myself, where I'm like, oh, I'm pretty comfortable. Everyone's nice to me. I don't want to leave this, comfort zone. And I agree. It's wanting more for yourself and demanding more for yourself, I think, is super critical. And also like getting over the imposter syndrome. It's something that is going to live on. Like even now, it's like I'm constantly questioning my capabilities and my job and whether I can do it or not. And it's super easy to look at a job description and be like, ooh, you know, I'm missing like 3 of these bullet points. I'm just not going to apply, or you know, this sounds a little bit harder than I'm used to. And it's overcoming that, because frankly, all of your competition and the people who are applying for that same job, they have the same issue. Either they're over their imposter syndrome, or they have a level of confidence that is just fantastic. And so it's just worth, you know, just getting over that hump.
Great, great advice, and thank you very much. Let's get a round of applause for our panelists today.